Here for Exos Arizona. I'm going to be talking to you today about plyometrics for the general population. Plyometrics are super fun. I love movement, and I want to share these ideas with you, and looking forward to hear some of your questions at the end of the webinar. I've been here for 7 years at this facility. I started as an intern out in LA at Core Performance Center with OMI, and then I went to Exos LA or APLA to do my performance specialist internship. From there, I got pretty much brought to this facility here in Arizona to work primarily with soccer athletes, and I've been working with a lot of youth, a lot of international teams, gotten to travel the world. And lately, as of this year, I'm now full-time part of the education team. So I'll be just teaching our mentorships and education courses all around the world. So super happy to be here and share this with you. For all of those that are joining us from across the pond, how's it going? So we'll get started. So the conversation is going to be about plyometrics and plyometrics for general population. So I think it will be just fair to say first, what are plyometrics? Define plyometrics. And plyometrics are movements or fundamental movement patterns that link speed and strength. It could be in many different settings and many different directions. And yes, it could be for athletic development as we know it, but it can also be used for general population. This is what I want to bring to you today. So plyometrics are just those movements that are fast, they're quick, they're explosive, they're reactive. They're pretty sexy to look at, but it's important to understand some of the principles behind those plyometrics, like the stretch-shorten cycle. The stretch-shorten cycle is pretty much defined as a quick eccentric contraction followed by an amortization phase or a transitional period, then a quick concentric contraction. That's what a stretch-shorten cycle is. And in order to qualify a plyometric, it has to actually utilize the stretch-shorten cycle. Now, what are the benefits of this stretch-shorten cycle that I'm talking about? It allows you to produce force faster, quicker, and actually more efficiently, meaning it actually takes less energy for your body to produce. So if we're looking at a basic movement like a squat, if I'm going down, I'm pulling my muscles, I'm stretching my muscles almost like a rubber band along with the fascias and the tendons attached to those muscles. Then I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to actually push the ground away or produce a concentric contraction to explode up and produce as much force as possible. When that happens very fast, we always go back to that analogy, and I don't want to do it because I have the mic, but we go back to that analogy that I learned from Mark Verstegen presenting to Perform Better, where he actually uses the analogy of the finger being pulled back and slapping the chest, right, as being more efficient in a way to produce force very rapidly, very quickly. So that's what the stretch-shorten cycle does for us when it comes to plyometrics and all the movements that we do. So just remember that in order for a plyometric to qualify, it has to utilize the stretch-shorten cycle. And then with that, we need to go into what is the goal of doing this? What is the goal of the plyometrics? So we'll look at the difference between broadband and dial-up. So if you think at movements like squatting, lunging, that do not imply necessarily the stretch-shorten cycle, that would be like utilizing movements in dial-up. They're going to be a little bit slower, a little more control. You're going to produce force, but they're not going to be produced as fast. When you're looking at broadband, for example, broadband like we use today is very fast, quick. You click on the mouse, that information appears right there and then. So that's what we're looking at when we do a movement that utilizes stretch-shorten cycle. It's fast, it's explosive, it's quick, right? It utilizes very little energy. Now, what do we want to do with this? We want to train the nervous system primarily. That's one of the main goals of the plyometrics. Is to teach the body how to be effective and produce energy in a broadband mode compared to dial-up. Now, another benefit of plyometrics is not just to teach the nervous system to be fast and explosive, but also to actually train the muscles, the tendons to be more resilient to those high forces, those high level contractions that are going to happen very fast and in different ranges of motions and different directions. One thing that happens very often and that we see is that plyometrics are used, for example, in group classes or let's say CrossFit, right? Where they're going to do a lot of repetitions of jumps, like box jumps. You're going to do 7 minutes of box jumps nonstop, or you're going to do 50 box jumps nonstop. Now, yes, they're using actually plyometrics. Yes, they're using the stretch-shorten cycle, But as the movements progress, fatigue starts setting in, and then it becomes more of a metabolic type of movement and conditioning rather than actually a neural type of movement. And remember, what we want to teach is the body to be more efficient and effective in a neural way. So we don't recommend for us in our nomenclature or in an Exos methodology or systems to use plyometrics necessarily for metabolic conditioning. We know that we have a lot of tools to do so. But normally what we're going to use plyometrics for is for that athletic development or just to develop the quickness and power and also neuromuscular control when it comes to fast, rapid movements. And we're going to keep it pretty short. So the movements are going to be anywhere between maybe 3-6 repetitions, depending on the intensity, depending on the level of stress. So be able to make sure that we tap into the neuromuscular system, not necessarily the metabolic system. So with that being said, right, that kind of puts a little bit of a context of what plyometrics are, what do we want to use plyometrics for, and what are the advantages or what are the benefits of applying plyometrics to our training session. Now, with that, we can move into the implementation. So how do we want to implement plyometrics? So one of the things that we need to always think is the principles of training. So from slow to fast, from simple to complex, from low force to high force, from bilateral to unilateral. So the idea is to always have a progression to the movements and understand that we can now play with this continuum and we can actually adapt those movements depending on what we want to achieve and the population that we're working with. So understanding those principles is going to take us to the 3 variables that in our Exos training system we can always manage, and that's going to be the movement, the direction, and the initiation. So with these 3 variables, we have a big combination of movement patterns that we can utilize and we can adapt, modify, play with just to make the exercises either more difficult, more simple, make it more complex, as just, for example, just adding a different initiation. And I'm going to show you examples of each of those movements. So with that being said, let's look at actually this concept which we call pre-plyometrics. Pre-plyometrics is, in a way, kind of like the axis to plyometrics. So before you learn how to accelerate, which we know that in plyometrics is going to happen, right? The speed and strength combined. Before you can accelerate, you need to learn how to decelerate. The analogy that I love to use with my youth athletes is like having a Ferrari with no brakes. That will not be a car you want to get into because most likely you're going to crash and you're going to get hurt, right? So with the same thing with plyometrics. Everybody can jump. Everybody can actually speed up. But do you really know how to slow down and decelerate? And that's going to be so important to teach to our athletes and also general population. Why? Because deceleration is something that we all going to encounter. Everything that goes up must go down. So with pre-plyometrics, we're going to introduce what we call the base position or the athletic position, which is going to be key. So we're looking at landing mechanics, pretty much. How you land. You don't need to leave the ground to do this. You can just stand in a tall position. You can go towards the ball of your feet, and you're going to actually imagine you're going to pull the roof down with you. Down and fast, hold that position. Can you put on the brakes? Just like stomping on the brakes pretty fast. Hold good posture, have a good pattern, own the position, and repeat. That, for example, is actually what we call a drop squat. 2 legs to 2 legs, all right? We're keeping it bilateral, simple, and it's pretty much slow because I'm not going anywhere, right? There's not a lot of force going down because I didn't leave the ground. Now, pre-plyometrics can actually be progressed as well. So for example, we can go from 2 legs to 1 leg. So I can start with 2 feet and then just drop into 1 leg. That automatically increases the level of difficulty just because I'm going from bilateral to unilateral. So once again, going back to the principles of implementation, right, from simple to complex, from bilateral to unilateral, that'll start allowing us to play with the movements and make it just a nice, easy progression and make it more challenging for our clients and athletes. Now, I can just simply keep it into 1 to 1 leg. So for example, going on 1 leg, dropping on 1 leg, you can see that I'm actually struggling to balance. I'm using actually my right leg, which is a little bit weaker than my left, right? And I need to own that position because if I get more dynamic, like jumping or bounding, which I'm going to show in a second, right? That means that when it comes to deceleration, I'm actually going to struggle a little more. And the higher the force, the higher the needs to have more control of the body. So Pre-plyometrics would allow us to start teaching those mechanics, the landing mechanics, but also start preparing the nervous system to absorb, the nervous system and the muscular system to absorb force. We can play with the movements. So like I said, we can do it on a squat type of pattern. I can play with the direction. So I can go from one leg to the other leg, displacing my body to the side, or I can actually even do it in a rotational fashion. So the possibilities, they're almost endless, but it all depends on what you want to attain and are looking forward to achieve. Now, we move from pre-plyometrics, and if you want to see a little bit more of that, there's a little plug right there. Just go to my my Instagram account, coach_Jair, and I just posted a pre-plyometrics video series, and I'm about to do part 2. It's also at our education Instagram account as well. So if you want to see a little more ideas and want to see more videos, just go there. That will be a good reference, and I'll be looking for the part 2. So now we're looking at plyometrics. So we go from pre-plyometrics, right, the access code, to plyometrics, and now I'm moving to plyometrics. And now we're going to look at movements. In movements, we're going to have 3 movements on our based on our exercise training system. Here, if you want to look at the outline that I know Colin is going to put on the chat box, you can actually see some of the movements that we're going to be talking about today. So you'll see that I added 3 movements plus 1 more, which is skipping. So let's go through the movements. We got jump. So jump is defined as two leg takeoff, 2-leg landing. So a jump will be this. 2-leg takeoff, 2-leg landing, right? Pretty simple, right? A lot more stable, a lot more easy to execute. Then we can go up a notch and take it into a bound. A bound basically is one leg to another leg. So we're looking at taking off one leg, landing on the other leg. Okay, that will be a bound. And also we have a hop. A hop will be from one leg to one leg. So meaning that I can jump from one leg to one leg. So we have those 3 variations based on our exercise training system. I also want to just throw out there for you, skipping, depending on the skipping and what you're doing and how you're doing, it can also be considered a plyometric because those qualify for what actually defines a plyometric. Remember, speed and strength, straight shortness cycle, rapid movements, they're neuromuscular driven. So skipping, those qualify for actually plyometrics, and we can actually categorize them just as well as plyometrics. Low impact, high impact, or slow plyometrics, fast plyometrics. So skipping is another one that you can consider as well because it can be easily implemented in a room. So I don't even have to move to do skipping. I can just basically skip in place as part of my movement preparation or as part as actually a progression for plyometrics as well. So that's something else that I want you there to consider because usually we don't see skipping as a plyometric, but it actually is. Now, so we have our 3 movements based on our exercise training system: jump, bound, hop. Now, from those 3 options, from our menu of those 3 options, we have a sub-menu. And that sub-menu is going to be actually the direction and the initiation, which actually, if you think about it, that's like a matrix, a 3x3 matrix, which actually increases your possibilities to almost an endless array of options to do in plyometrics. So I want to take you through all those different variations to make sure that we are all on the same page. So we're looking at jumps. So for example, if I look at a jump, I can now say, okay, 2 legs to 2 legs. Now I'm going to look at the direction. So do I want to do a vertical jump? Do I want to do a horizontal jump or a broad jump, long jump, whichever way you want to call it? Or do I want to do a rotational jump? So I got 3 options right there with the jump in itself. Now, what about initiation? Initiations, I have a non-counter movement. I have a counter movement, a double contact, continuous, and any type of dead jumps or drop jumps. Let me show you all of them right now. So let's start with the jump. Let's start with the direction. It's going to be vertical. Initiation is going to be non-counter movement. What does that mean? So it means that I'm actually going to get into the bottom position of the jump. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be at the lowest, but I'm going to actually end and start when I actually do my drop squat. So if I do a drop squat, that's probably where I want to initiate. I'm going to show you sideways so you can see the depth. We're looking at about, what, quarter of a squat, more or less, right? So This is going to be my initial position. I'm going to stop at the bottom. And by definition, a non-counter movement jump is not a plyometric because it does not necessarily utilize a stretch or a cycle like it should. Because I'm holding the position at the bottom, I'm losing that elastic energy. I'm not going to be able to maximize that stretch reflex. Therefore, I'm just using primarily concentric strength to pull me out of this position. So I get to the bottom, I hold it for at least 3 seconds based on what research tells us, and then I jump. I always come back down to the initial position because landing or deceleration, as we talk about in pre-plyometrics, is extremely important. Everything that goes up must go down. So always encourage your clients and athletes to always pay careful attention to landing, because every single plyo, every single jump, bound, hop, you get an opportunity to teach deceleration. We cannot miss on that opportunity. So that will be a jump, vertical, initiation, non-counter movement. Now, let's look at the second option. What about a jump that is going to be now horizontal, and the initiation is going to be counter movement, meaning that now I'm going to utilize the stretch short cycle. So I'm not going to have a lot of room here, but I'll move a little bit back. So jump, horizontal, initiation, counter movement. I'm going to start in my tall position. Stick that landing, and that will be a jump that is counter movement, horizontal direction. Now, what about if I talk about a jump that is going to be rotational, and the initiation is going to be double contact? So now I'm at an actually a lot higher level of complexity, not just necessarily for understanding of the movement, but also control of the pattern and understanding how to apply force in a very short amount of time. So I'm going to do a 90-degree rotational jump. Emphasis is going to be vertical, but the initiation is going to be double contact. Now, for this one, I'm going to do it about 2 times, and I just want you to pay attention to my feet, because that's going to be the key part of the initiation. So as you can see, hopefully you can appreciate on the camera that before I take off, my feet leave the ground for just a fraction of a second. What that does is it creates a pre-activation and tension of the muscles and the tendons. So when I contact the ground, I'm ready to apply more force. As you can see, my jump is going to be a little more shallow, meaning the position that I'm taking off is a little more shallow because I don't need to. I have a lot of elastic energy already stored, ready to be just delivered into the ground to be able to produce more force rapidly and efficiently. So that will be just an example of jump, the same movement with different directions, different initiations. Let's continue exploring this because I know there's might be a lot of questions. It was like, wait a minute, what is happening? I just saw a couple jumps. They kind of look similar, but they're not. Let's continue showing you more. So let's talk about bounding. Bounding, one of my favorite things that you can do, right? One leg to another leg. It's a little more demanding than the jump, but not as demanding as the hop, right? Because you're actually dispersing the forces between one leg and the other. So the bound, let's look at the bound. Bound one leg to the next. I'm going to start with a non-counter movement. This one is going to be still a vertical emphasis, even though I'm going to be moving a little bit to the side. Non-counter movement initiation, meaning that I'm starting at the bottom of the jump or the bound, right? This is a non-plyometric by definition. So I'm going to start at the bottom. Now watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to insert my drop squats, my pre-plyometrics, as a way to start the movement. I'm already on one leg. I'm going to drop to one leg. I can use this leg to kickstand, find the balance. I'm going to hold it for 3 seconds. I'm going to jump, stick that landing, reset. That will be a bound, vertical emphasis, okay? And technically it's a lateral bound if you want to think of that way, because I'm going from one side to the next, not forward, but still vertical emphasis, initiation, non-counter movements. Let's look at another example of a bound. So now I'm going to do a counter movement bound, horizontal emphasis. Initiation is going to be counter movement. So meaning that I'm using the stretch short cycle now. I'm going to start on one leg. I'm already starting tall. I'm just going to go in, out, stick that landing, and I can move back. The idea is now adding displacement. What about if I add a bound that is going to be rotational? The same as we did earlier, the same progressions, and I want to use the same in 3 different movements. so you can actually start getting the flow of it. So I'm going to do a bound that is going to be rotational 90 degrees with horizontal displacement. I'm not going to move too far because I'm going to get out of camera, but you'll get the point. So now I'm going to start one leg, counter movement, starting tall, rotational, stick down landing, reset. So that will be the same idea as we did with the jump, but did I say double contact or counter movement? I said counter movement. I'm right. I was checking over here with the creative director to make sure that I'm actually on track. So yes, so that will be a bound, right? Horizontal, rotational. Now, let's look at hops. Hops, one leg to the same leg. Now, by definition, this one's actually going to be the hardest ones because you're taking off with the same leg that you're landing. So the same leg's doing two efforts, right? It's actually working a lot harder and it's just one leg. So with the hop, same process. Let's look at a vertical hop, non-counter movement. Get into my position. I hold it for about 3 seconds. Jump, I land, control, reset. Being wobbly, it's okay. Having to tap the floor, it's okay. You can use it as a kickstand. The main idea is can you recover and get back to a neutral or optimal position? It's not that you have to land perfect every single time. It's can you recover from a bad position quickly and efficiently, right? If you stick it and it's perfect, hey, good for you. But if you don't, no problem. Okay? That's the whole point of training plyometrics and training deceleration, is to have and acquire that control, neuromuscular control, with movements that happen very fast. Now, looking at the hop, same progression that we did earlier. Now I'm going to do a hop that's going to be horizontal displacement, counter movement initiation. So I'm going to start one leg, start nice and tall, stick down landing, reset, go back. Now, just like we did before, now I'm going to do the hop that's going to be 90-degree rotational. So for this one, I'm going to keep it as before. It's going to be horizontal displacement. The initiation, I'm going to make it pretty hard for myself. It's going to be a double contact, 90-degree rotational hop. So I start nice and tall. Remember, pay attention to my foot. I was going to leave the ground before I take off. Okay. So that will be an example of each of the movement patterns, right? The options that we have with different directions, different initiations. Now, I haven't really talked about any type of drop jumps or depth jumps. I'm just going to cover them pretty quickly. I have my blue box right here to help me out demonstrate. So we have a depth jump. Depth jump, I'm coming out of the camera. Let me move back. So depth jump, it will be any type of movement that I do stepping off a surface or a platform. And my goal or intent is to jump as high as I can. That will be a depth jump. So I'm going to step off. I'm going to do just a vertical depth jump. I'm going to step off the box and jump as high as I can. Now, if I do a drop jump, the intent of the drop jump is to get off the floor as quick as I can. The height is not the main emphasis. It's the quickness of the movement that actually truly matters. So I'm going to do the same. Jump, vertical emphasis. I'm going to step off the box. Minimum time contact, which we deem ground contact time, which is very important when we are actually working with athletes. We're trying to develop that quickness to be able to produce as much amount of force in the shortest amount of time, which is one of the goals of plyometrics as well. And that will be the difference between the drop jump and the depth jump. Okay. Now, with that being said, we have all the options. We have all the movements and directions, all the initiations covered. Okay. Now we can just play with those variables to be able to adapt the movements to what we want to accomplish. Now, so what do we do in a general population program? So I was looking at this last night, and I created a few programs there on your handout that you got. Something that's going to introduce and get you through the progressions, from simple to complex, from slow to fast, from balance to unbalance. And it's going to add a little variety, because something that we know that in order to get the best effects of plyometrics, we have to introduce variety in the movements. Variety doesn't mean that you have to do it all of it in one day. It's just like a menu. You just pick one item on the menu for that day. You eat that item. The next day you come back and you can select another item on the menu. Well, we're going to do exactly the same here with plyometrics. So I'm going to give you a quick little rundown of what actually a program will look like. I'm not going to demo the whole session, but I'm going to demo the progression so you can see it. So I'm going to start, for example, with my pre-plyometrics. Let's say I already warmed up, already did my movement preparation. I'm ready to get into my plyometric session, which is going to be about 10 minutes, maybe even less, right? Because the reality is that we're not going to do high volume. The intensity is going to be somewhat low, so we don't need that much rest in between the sets. So I'm going to start with my pre-plyometrics. I'm going to start with my drop squats. I'm going to get it nice and tall, drop. I like doing the drop squats on command to make it a little more reactive. This is my set position. This is my drop position. Okay, I'm going to do those. I think I have in your program 8 times because as you can tell, you can just do them back to back. Okay. The main idea is to put on the brakes, stop, hold the position, and this gives you an opportunity for you to adjust the patterns. And if someone is landing with bad mechanics, for example, someone is landing with the knees going forward, you can start teaching them how to shoot their hips back or get into what we call a shortstop position, proper landing mechanics. Everybody's going to look a little different. There's no gold standard, but we do know that we want to make sure that we drop straight down to the ground. We utilize the hips or load the hips in the movement. The weight is going to be shifted a little bit forward towards the feet. Chest is going to be nice and proud. That's it. Hands are going to be back, more or less, but we don't want to see people landing just with the knees dropping forward necessarily. We're going to make sure to absorb the force. So we teach you how to drop squat. Maybe in the same session, I'm going to teach them how to go from 2 to 1. I want to start introducing a little bit of balance. Challenge their ability to decelerate, stabilize, own the position. As you can tell, sometimes it takes a couple repetitions just to get it right. From there, now that actually I prepped them to decelerate, now we're going to accelerate. So I'm going to take them, for example, for a progression of different jumps. We're going to start with non-counter movement first. So meaning that once I land it, I'm going to set them in their position, hold it, jump as high as you can, own the position. Reset, get into your position. Now remember, you can always add drop squats at the beginning of the non-counter movement jumps or any non-counter movement hop or bound. Maximize your time, minimal investment, maximum returns. So always drop, hold the position, jump. So you do your non-counter movement jumps, you do a series, rest, and then repeat. Then you progress it. You can now, for example, still keeping it vertical. I'm just gonna do, for example, now add, if I don't have an implement or don't have an implement, I can do exactly the same and just in a box. Now, the reason why we use the box is not necessarily to make it sexy or because I want to jump on a surface that's higher than I can actually jump to. So I want to decrease the force at landing, right? Because that is shortening now the distance between me and the ground when I go and land. So if I have a box, I can use the box to do the same. I can prep, hold, stick that landing, reset. So whether you're using something like an implement or a box or not, the process is the same. You do 2 series non-counter movement jumps to gain the feeling, to gain the idea of how to produce force from the ground from a stop position, how to decelerate. Now you can make it more dynamic and go into your counter movement. We talked about it before, counter movement, nice and tall, drop, jump, stick that landing. Something that I want you to pay attention to is emphasize that push into the ground or push away from the ground. We want to see triple flexion, triple extension, right? But hey, I don't want to tell my clients that. All I want to say is, hey, reach for the sky, reach for the clouds, touch the roof, explore off the ground. I want to encourage that ability to produce force fast and quick so they can actually start training their neuromuscular system. Once I do a couple series of counter movement jumps, now I can actually maybe make it a little bit fun and we can start adding some rotational jumps. And if you want to, I can maybe introduce double contact if I feel like it's appropriate. So same process, I finish my repetitions. Now I'm gonna go for rotational jumps. Double contact to make sure that it's a little bit challenging for them. It's gonna require coordination. Reset, I'm gonna go the opposite direction. So you notice that it takes me very little time before one of the jumps and the second jump, right? So it's a minimal time, it goes quick. It does feel like, hey, I'm getting a workout, but by no means is it metabolic conditioning. I'm tapping into the nervous system. That's why I'm going to take a break. I'm going to rest. then I'm gonna go back at it. So that will be an example of something that I actually put in your handout. You can, just for reference, there's actually an example of a 3-day progression that you can actually follow. And obviously, if you have any questions, you can always hit me up, jlee@teamaccess.com. And yeah, so that will be plyometrics. Just to summarize real quick, plyometrics are movements that link speed and strength and fundamental movement patterns. Plyometrics, by definition, utilize the stretch-shorten cycle. The goal is neuromuscular adaptations, not necessarily metabolic adaptations or metabolic conditioning. The implementations or the variables that we're going to play with, they're going to be the movement, direction, and initiation. We have our pre-plyometrics, which is actually our access card to plyometrics, which is going to teach us deceleration. And then we can actually start talking about jumping, bounding, and hops. We said that skipping actually was one of the options where we could be considered a plyometric, even though in our access training system, we necessarily don't put it in that, that realm. So that's it. Any questions?
Awesome.
Fire up.
We do have a few questions.
Yes.
Hopefully you can hear me. The mic is on Jair, so I'll speak as loud as I can to make sure it's coming through. The first one is actually, this is for general population.
Yeah.
And we've got a question that came in here that said, like, why should I do these with Gen Pop? Like, what's the reason, right? And how do I know when they're ready for it and when to progress? So we showed progression, but how do I know when they're ready to progress? They said, what markers do I look for? Is this appropriate for like the weekend warrior I'm working with, or is this appropriate for Grandma Betty? So just sort of bridging that gap to general population. How do I know they're ready, and why? Like, why should I tell my client we're doing this?
Okay, perfect. So the first part of the question is why should I be doing this with general population? Plyometrics, I think, are very important to utilize with general population because a lot of these people actually still engage in activities that actually might require them to react to the ground and being fast, especially with to decelerate. The last thing we want is that person to not have the ability to, when they actually walking down the street and they stumble or they actually take a misstep, they don't have the ability to put up enough force quickly into the ground to break that fall. That's going to be reason number one. Reason number two is because as we age, we know that we lose axial fast twitch muscle fibers. And what happens? Most of the training that we do in the weight room, guess what? Doesn't happen very fast, right? Slow. Here we go. We're going to do 10 reps, right? And the tempo is going to be nice and slow. Good. You're actually lowering the body, which is fantastic. It has great benefits, but it doesn't have the same benefits as movements that actually link speed and strength. And normally, as we age, we start losing those abilities. What we want to do is we want to try to hold on to those abilities a little bit longer. Now, so that's one of the main reasons why. With the weekend warrior, absolutely you want to do this. If your weekend warrior likes to play basketball, likes to go out for a run, trail running, whatever it is, any sports activity, I guarantee that in any of those movements, there's going to be some plyometrics movements involved in it. Now, if we teach him how to properly land and produce force, his body's going to be better able to manage those loads. His tissues, right, muscles, tendons, ligament, they're also going to be a little more resilient as well. Because once again, it's something that they get stressed when we do weight training, but it doesn't get stressed in the same fashion as the movement occur on actually the natural environment. Now, how do we know when someone is ready to do plyometrics? That is actually a tricky question. But for me, like I said, the access code or the card to be able to move to plyometrics is pre-plyometrics. If I have, let's say my mom is 70 years old, I guarantee my mom can do this without getting hurt. If my mom cannot do this, cannot actually decelerate her body properly, cannot actually have good control of her mechanics, I know that I'm not going to progress her into actually doing jumps now into a box just because that's what's on the recipe. So I'm going to actually use my pre-plyometrics either on the movement preparation or as a standalone type of circuit or series of exercises to actually see if actually someone qualifies for being able to do this type of movements. Now, also, I know you're looking at their strength because you actually take them to different workouts and routines. So you can see if someone doesn't have a foundational strength, cannot control their own body weight in some of the movements, maybe plyometrics in itself, they're not ready for it. Pre-plyometrics, I guarantee that they can start doing some of those. I think that answers all the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really like as well, like that stumble example. I find when I'm lecturing on plyometrics, I always reference, the elite sprinter needs to get off the ground in, less than a tenth, but in 90, 0.09 seconds, like the speed of that ground contact. Stumble reflex and fall prevention research is the exact same number. You've got less than a tenth of a second to catch yourself. And if you can't react quickly and do that, you're going down. And start looking at even just research on fall prevention for Grandma Betty. And if you do fall and break your hip, what that looks like for outcome, in the following 5 years. So I think that's a great point. We have another question that says,
yes, please.
What movement would develop faster? Or what movement, would develop power faster? A drop jump or a depth jump?
Interesting. So I think the question here is what movement is going to develop power faster? So we got to look at actually these two variables, which are one, rate of force development. So you want to produce as much force in the shortest amount of time. Great. So that means I'm going to do actually a drop jump. That meaning that I want to get off the ground as quick as possible. However, if we only train that component and we actually neglect the other ability to produce a lot of force regardless of time, it's like only training for hypertrophy per se. And then I'm missing the power continuum or actually skipping a phase in our training program. So we want to actually target both of them. But we want to start gearing or progressing towards faster movements in the short amount of time, less ground contact time. So that will be the continuum. You necessarily don't want to just jump into everything that you do is super short, because it doesn't allow the body to have that wide range capabilities which you might encounter. Because sometimes in a situation, let's say coming out of a cut, I might have to stop a little longer and explode out of the position. In other situations, I might have to come out and be a little bit more reactive. So having those two qualities are going to help us out.
Yeah. You talked about this a little bit, but for someone who is absolutely brand new, maybe severely overweight or obese, as far as the pre-plyos, maybe weight shifts, those types of things, how would you extremely regress? And you talked about the example of your mother, and there maybe just kind of expand on that a little
bit. So if someone, let's say someone is overweight and is starting a new program, pre-plyometrics necessarily might not be the best fit, but I will almost be assured that if they can squat their own body weight, they can do this. They can just start dropping into the squat a little bit faster. Now, I want you to try to appreciate this difference. Watch this. This is normally what I do. This is my normal drop squat. All right? I'm actually forcibly putting the brakes really, really hard. You probably heard that noise. That was the floor. Now, I don't have to do that. I can do this. There's not even impact on that movement. I don't have to leave the ground. So it allows me to progress the movement just like pretty much getting into a squat a little bit faster. If I was doing like a body weight squat, we'll be like doing this. So just teaching them how to get into a bottom position a little bit faster might be a good starting point for them. Or perhaps you're just going to keep them with body weight movements at first. And once they start getting a little bit stronger and have better body control, maybe the pre-plyometrics might be something that you want to start injecting into the program.
Awesome. Just a really quick one. We've actually got quite a few here, so we're going to go like.
Good. Let's go. Rapid fire.
We've got time.
Let's go.
We've got time. Next one's quick. Your feet are fast, man.
Thank you. There's a camera.
Can you demo the double contact again? Make sure really.
No problem.
Double contact.
Slow it down a little bit.
So is there a way, you mind moving the camera and I can get a little closer so they can see my feet? There we go. So that will help out. That will be very slow. I'll do it a few times. Let me move to the light. There you go. Now I'll do the last one more aggressive. So the idea is to basically punch the ground. I try to punch the ground and get out of the way from the ground as quick as I can. But as you saw in those demonstrations, I could do it slow. I can do it fast. Because I did mention it, I didn't go in depth, but there's two different types of plyometrics. We got slow plyometrics, we got fast plyometrics, or slow stretch, shorten, cycle, fast stretch, shorten, cycle. But yeah.
Got a few questions about kind of ongoing group exercise class programming, right? So you provided some sample programming, a 3 times a week program, maybe expand on your thought process behind that. But there are some questions about how often do you vary it up? maybe progressions, regressions, as far as for ongoing classes, or you also don't know what kind of consistency you're going to get from your attendees, right?
Exactly.
I might have someone who comes every day. I might have someone who drops in 3 times a month, maybe. So maybe your approach to that, and maybe how your 3 times a week sample programming takes that into play.
Yeah, that's actually a great question, and honestly, like, we'll have to probably like really think about it a little longer. But the first thought that I get is it's understanding the population that I'm working with. I know that the progressions that I'm going to do are going to be very basic, and I'm going to play within the intro type of phase of plyometrics, where if I have someone who hasn't showed up or someone who's not very consistent, they're not going to be left out, and they're not going to be able to do the movements just because they haven't been showing up in the past 2 weeks. So if I always concentrate on playing around with pre-plyometrics and some basic variations of jumps, and with basic initiations, that would allow me to play a little bit with those type of settings. And remember, you got more variables. It doesn't have to be jump, bound, hop, and everything in one session. I can just keep playing with jumps, because honestly, plyometrics is one of those things that you actually have to get kind of good at it, and it takes some time. And you gotta have to spend a little more time and preface that to your clients and the people participating in your group classes, that hey, this is the goal of this part of the session, is to make you more explosive and powerful, to make you safer when you're actually playing with your kids, whatever it is the case. But you want to make sure that they understand that this is something that they're going to have to not master per se, but they're going to have to get pretty good at it, and it's going to take a little bit longer and a lot more repetitions, especially when it's just a small part of the program. And it's no different than what we do it here with our athletes. Honestly, I don't add a lot of variations sometimes for a couple of weeks, because I need those repetitions in. And as long as the athlete understands that this is for their own good, I rather add the variability and other type of fun stuff in another part of the program, where actually I'm a little bit safer to play with. In this type of settings, I'm going to keep it a little more repetitive, if you may.
So we've got actually a sports-specific question for
yes.
you. And the person asking this may not have known this, but we had a snowboarder that has worked in Exos, Arizona here with us, that I think you've helped support at times.
Yeah, I trained
for a while. In the Olympics. So
yeah, Megan 30.
Yeah, and I know that this is awesome, because I know you love surfing, snowboarding, all that. So this is right up your alley, Jay.
Perfect. Let's go.
Talk about plyos, use, implementation, a good workout, good programming for a snowboarder.
Ooh, that's a little bit of a loaded question. It will take probably the whole webinar to do that. But and this, I got to be a little careful what I say, I guess, as well. Believe it or not, I'm going to respect the principles and progressions of our system, because it's well put together. Understanding that I got my variables to play with, and the variability for an athlete is actually going to help them out to attain a broad spectrum of capabilities, and make sure that they get good or better at the ones that they're not as good at. I'm going to play with all the different jumps, variations of bounce, hops, and skipping and whatnot, different directions. Now, understanding the sport allows you to actually start injecting something as specific as a little more of a drop jumps, depth jumps as well, and even just stepping off of different surfaces, different heights, because they gotta absorb a lot of force. Being a snowboarding myself and enjoying, not anymore, but enjoying doing big jumps, I understand that when I go up, I'm going to eventually go down, and the force that it takes to decelerate your body is actually greater than the force that it took you to take off, right? So I'm going to actually encourage a lot of landing mechanics, and I'm just going to, for example, demo something real quick, and please don't do this when it's started with your general population, but I'm going to start, first of all, obviously understanding how to absorb force coming down from the box from different heights, but we're actually going to start maybe introducing different type of patterns where I want to teach him how to land in rotational fashion, because we understand, and the snowboarder does not ride this way, it rides this way, and the weight is not even. So understanding those mechanics starts teaching me that I have to teach the person how to land from different directions, with different initiations as well when you're coming off the ground, and that variety is going to allow us to be more not complex, but more inclusive.
And I think that your point of respecting the progression is still valuable, because remember, we aren't just doing plyometrics for performance enhancement. It doesn't have to be sport specific. There's also just this ability to absorb force in different ranges.
Yeah.
And there's a good ample amount of research. And if anyone is curious, hit up either Jair or continuous improvement at teamexos.com. But there is research looking at plyometrics as neuromuscular training for ACL prevention. right?
Absolutely.
So there's absolutely a strong argument made to this ability to absorb force from a standpoint of injury prevention. We know that obviously snowboarders have a lot.
Yeah.
Quick one. I'll go back to back with these.
Great.
And a couple requests as to what your shoes are.
This came out for the World Cup 4 years ago for the World Cup in Brazil, and they made the shoes for every single country that was in the World Cup. I do happen to have this ones for the USA, and also have it for Mexico because I'm Mexican. So they do have the flag at the bottom. So they're indoor shoes. Yeah, you got to match.
Oh, yeah.
Blue and blue.
Second question is a little bit more. So.
All right, let's go.
There's been someone asked, my chiropractor says many of his patients come in with injuries from plyometric-based exercise. And I think that's something that we talked about. Like maybe talk about why they get a bad rap, some pitfalls of programming that you see out there from coaches that maybe might lead to injuries. Just kind of why they get that, or why they might be injury heavy when people are doing them, and then how maybe we can prevent it. So big open.
Good. That's a great question, honestly, and I'm going to be very blunt, and whatever I said doesn't mean to offend. It's just my humble opinion. So something that I experienced going out there to different facilities to train is that plyometrics get used for metabolic conditioning or metabolic training, where volume and intensity becomes actually the norm and the quality goes down the drain. So when fatigue starts setting in, for example, if you have me doing, even myself, if I were to do this little box, right, for 5 minutes, jumping up and down, nonstop, eventually my form is going to start suffering. And once my form starts suffering, my nervous system starts getting fatigued, my ability to control and decelerate forces is something that is going to keep coming back. The ability to not produce force is easy. Decelerate force is hard. So the ability to decelerate, it starts actually going down. And once that happens, tissues start taking the load, start taking the beating, and this is when things starting to go. So knowing that plyometrics, they're not necessarily intended to be metabolic in nature. They can be, by no means, anything can be, right? Jumping jacks can be, but that is not the main purpose or objective. And I think a lot of people have gotten injured, and I've seen it when I go to CrossFit, and I do CrossFit, right? Not that thing. And all of a sudden they go, hey, you're gonna do snatches, you're going to do deadlifts, and now you're going to do box jumps and as fast as you can because you got 20 minutes. Even myself, knowing the form and everything, my form starts going to crap, honestly. So once that happens, I know that the chances for me to getting hurt are going to depend on the training that I've done previously and my body to being resilient to that high level of stress. And when you have someone who's untrained, doesn't have the strength and the fitness qualities to sustain those high forces for a long period of time, it's very easy for something to go. So yes, they're gonna get a bad rap, and also that's because we need to start with defining what actually true plyometrics are. And doing box jumps for 7 minutes is not a great idea by any means, and for no one, not even for an athlete. Can it be done? Absolutely. The risk, reward, benefit, I don't think it's worth it, and I've done it.
I'm gonna throw another one to you that's right up your alley.
Yeah.
Again, people may not know all of your background, but
Yeah.
Jair has actually worked with many national and professional level soccer players and teams. So I mean, he spent significant time, for example, in Brazil with a pro club. So this is right up your alley because it's about soccer.
Yeah, okay.
Particularly for soccer athletes, the max force they will need to absorb is the max height of their vertical jump. So, I mean, they're going up for ball coming down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you ever progressively overload the eccentric load by having them vertical jump off of a higher surface, allowing them to absorb more eccentric force?
If they meet the requirements, that they can actually do all the basics and following the principles of progressions and the variables that we actually already discussed. If they actually control very well their body, they actually demonstrate a good amount of strength in the weight room as well. There's nothing wrong with having them step off of a higher surface. I think honestly, more than actually doing just a higher force, I think adding a little bit of variability with the landing is actually going to be more important. Being a former soccer player myself, I know that when I go up for a header, I'm never going to come down and land like this. You're not going to land perfect. If someone just pushed me off axis, when I'm flying up in the air, I'm going backwards, I'm looking at the ball, I'm trying to reposition my body before I even land, right? So I'm going to land in the most awkward type of position. Now, can I replicate that in my training sessions? No way, because I'm not playing soccer. But what I can do is I can give him the ability to actually absorb force with one leg, two legs, different directions, different angles, right? maybe actually with the eyes closed, being able to stabilize, right? Maybe stabilize, catch an implement, or even use an implement to be able to decelerate or force them to decelerate. So for example, I can do something like this to actually try to throw them off balance, and they can show the ability to demonstrate control. So the higher surface is not, it's a great idea. Can that be actually applied? Yes. We got to be very careful with that, because once you actually get up at a height that is probably half your body height, the forces that you're encountering are going to be probably 3 to 4 times your own body weight. So you can actually start treating it almost as if you were doing actually a max strength training to a certain degree. So just got to be careful. Can it be done? Yeah.
Yes, the answer is always if it's earned.
Yeah, like, you got to earn it.
If it's earned,
yeah,
absolutely. We've all worked with people that can do that and earn that right. If it's not earned or progress too quickly, cruising for something negative.
Yeah. Plus, I'm going to say soccer players are now the stronger athletes. So, yeah, they'll be fine just regular plyos, to be honest. And I've seen that all over the world. I can attest to that.
There was a question about arm action, right?
Yeah.
So when you went up, your arms go up.
Ooh,
down,
love it.
Could you expand on what's going on when using? Because I see that all the time, especially in a lot of group X classes, is jumping up, arms go down.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing. And like, yeah, stuff like that. So maybe talk about arm action. Is there ever a case where you wouldn't train how you demonstrate?
Ooh, beautiful. Actually, there's 3 answers right there. Number 1 is going to be why the arm action. The arm action is going to actually allow coordination of the body. It's going to enhance the stretch shortened cycle, because it's creating actually inertia or force. So as I throw my arms down, more force is going down, therefore it's pulling on my muscles and my tendons a little bit faster, activating the stretch shortened cycle at a greater degree, which is now in counter action is going to go the opposite direction. So number 1 is for coordination, 2 is for actually accentuate or increase the stretch shortened cycle of the reflex, the stretch reflex to a greater degree. And number 3, it also allows you to, let's say, if you want to reach for something, it's going to allow you to actually be more efficient. So that will be one of the points that it takes. Now, let me slow down. I'm excited. So if you're not going to use the arms, right, which is something that I do a lot with my athletes actually, is I enjoy taking the arms away. Why? Because once the arms are away, which allow you to actually produce more force, now it all comes down to what? The stability they can produce to their trunk, to their pillar, to their ability to just produce force with their legs. And that becomes very demanding. So next time that you try and do plyometrics for yourself, go ahead and do a series of jumps with your arms, and then go ahead and do a series of jumps with no arms, just like something like this. And that is way more demanding. All of a sudden, it feels like somebody put a weight vest on you. So that will be actually one of the purposes that I will do it, is to actually encourage them to be a little bit stronger when it comes to that concentric phase of the action of the movement, because it's taking away some of the ability to produce a greater stretch shortened cycle. Number 3, the jump with the arms in this synchrony. Nothing wrong with that, right? Can I jump and do this? Yeah. Sometimes in some scenarios and some movements and athletic movements, actually going up with the arms up is actually not what is going to happen because of the movement sequence and situation. You might need to have the arms in the opposite direction to counterbalance the body in case you're going off trajectory. I don't want to get too much in detail on the biomechanics, but that's kind of what happens. Now, if you're doing a photo shoot, you're going to see that a lot because it looks pretty cool. So if I do something like this, right, it looks better than if I go with my arms up in the sky. So think about other movements. Watch gymnasts, for example, how sometimes the arms have to play in the opposite direction to counteract forces, right? But doesn't mean that the sequence is exactly the most efficient to produce the mass amount of force.
Yeah, and that, I mean, there was a question on there exactly about that, saying if you're working with a downhill skier, right,
yeah,
seeing different positions. So I think you can answer that perfectly. And the only other thing, right, I'll add is, remember, over specificity leads to lack of adaptation. And downhill skiers getting a lot of that when they're skiing. We're trying to create a stimulus. And like you said, if in training, if it isn't about the sequence, but if the arms come down with the hips, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. You're putting more force down, you're going to get more out. So we're going to get more when we start looking at rate of force development, utilization, stretch shortening cycle, the stimulus we're putting on the body, we can potentially get more out of that. So not necessarily mimicking the sport. Not saying that's wrong, but just what what are we trying to achieve?
And I love that because it's just really quick in this. It's like when I work with soccer players and I ask them to jump this way, they say, we never jump like that because that will actually be a red card, right? If I hit the ball with my hands before jumping up, you jump with the arms to the side of your body, one to protect you from the person next to you, elbow the person in the face if you can, and then not to get the red card. So it's going to be a weird type of action when they jump. Sometimes they jump with the arms tied to their body. That's okay. That's soccer. This is plyometric training.
So our clock is hitting 10 o'clock. I just want to hit a few things very quickly. I think we got through most of the questions. I want to definitely thank Jair for his time. Appreciate you coming in, buddy.
That's great.
If your question didn't get answered, shoot Jair an email.
Yeah.
Shoot me an email. This is Stefan talking. Shoot me an email at continuousimprovement@teamexos.com. We love hearing from you. I know Jair loves talking with other coaches in our company. So if your question didn't get answered or didn't get answered properly, if we misunderstood, shoot an email. Like, let's get some dialogue going. Very quickly, just to let you know, a couple quick things to look out for. We have got the Continuous Improvement Hub up. I hope you guys have been going to it. I know right now there's not a lot to keep you going back every day. It will start changing. We'll start adding things. So keep an eye on that. But on there, I want to call out specifically our live events tab. Those live events are going to be Exos mentorships that you can get to for free, along with an application to do so. Come see Jair give a 4-day or a 2-day workshop and learn the system in depth. The other option is any third-party education that's going to go on in an Exos facility, like an FRC or something like that. We don't necessarily get that for free, but if it's something you're thinking about doing anyways, why not do it in an Exos facility? There is one course on there to call out where it isn't free, but there's a discount, and I don't have that highlighted on the hub. So if anyone's looking at the Reconditioning HQ course in April, hosted here in Exos, Arizona, send me an email with your interest because they are willing to give a pretty good, I think a $400 discount to every single Exos employee. So if you are interested in that, please, again, send me an email. But check out the hub. That will also have our webinar list. So you will see next month, we are back on. It'll be me, Stefan Underwood, back on camera talking about training for hypertrophy. Ironic I'm talking about it because I've never experienced hypertrophy in my life, but I'm a giant nerd. So we're going to talk about hypertrophy for your clients, because I know so many people, that's a lot of what they're about, is trying to pack on a little
Gotta get those gains.
Get those gains. So other than that, Jair, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you guys, appreciate it.
Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. We really appreciate these. You'll be getting a survey. I know it's the same survey every month. Please keep filling it out. It gives us feedback to get better, upgrade things, and helps me go to leadership to say we need more resources to do more things for our field and the staff. It's for our staff in the field. So thanks again, and we'll see you next month.
See ya. Thank you.